Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Numbers chapter 30, verse 1. Then Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing which the Lord has commanded. If a man makes a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Do not make a vow. Do not make a promise, because it will be held to you. You will be held accountable to make good on that word." That is why Christ would later say, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." Don't go making promises you do not intend to keep. In fact, don't make a promise at all. That way you don't have to worry about it. Just do what you say you're going to do. And if you say you're not going to do it, then don't do it. Be a man of your word. You don't have to make these grandiose claims and promises and not keep them. Just do what you say you're going to do. Of course, we live in a world that is, in a country that is unbelievably political all the time. And we have become accustomed to everyone making grandiose claims and promises and never even attempting to follow through on them. That is the nature of our society and culture. And now people do it in everyday life. These same things, these grandiose claims that they never follow through on. And it is incredibly sinful. If you make a promise, you will be held accountable to that promise. If you do not keep that promise, you have now sinned before the eyes of God. There's no other way to look at it. Don't make vows you don't intend to keep. Or if a woman makes a vow to the Lord and binds herself by some agreement while in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and the agreement by which she has bound herself, and her father holds his peace, then all her vows will stand, and every agreement with which she has bound herself shall stand. So if a woman makes a vow, this is now concerning a young woman, not married, she lives in her father's house, so she's under his authority, and if he hears the vows, and he holds his peace, and he doesn't say anything about it, then that vow stands. We hear this in wedding ceremonies to this day. Speak now or forever hold your peace. If you have an issue with this woman marrying this man, you need to speak now. Otherwise, her vow will be bound. She will be bound to that vow she just made. But if her father overrules her on the day that he hears, then none of her vows nor her agreements by which she has bound herself shall stand, and the Lord will release her because her father overruled her. So if her father hears her, not making the vows, but on the day he hears of them, could be a couple of days later, say, "Hey, did you hear your daughter made this vow to or about?" And you go, No, I refuse. I can't. That will not happen to my daughter. She can't make that ruling. Then she's overruled because she is under the authority of her father. People don't like that because people see it as patriarchal, but it's good to have someone looking out for you. See, people in our society, because of all of this nonsense, have really missed out on the fact that this is a way to protect women from making mistakes. And it's a protection that men are not afforded. See, if there's a son that this father has and he makes a vow at the same age as the daughter, and it's a stupid vow and it's a massive mistake, the parents can't pull the son out of it. It stands. His mistake stands. And now he needs to live by it. The daughter is protected by her father to shield her, to pull her out of her mistake and overrule her. That's actually not a patriarchal oppression of the daughter. That's a privilege of the daughter to have her father over her, to be able to say, hold on, no, that doesn't work that way. How I wish I could have had that in some of the mistakes I made when I was younger. My mother took a little bit more of a you'll learn by your own mistakes approach in a lot of ways to my life. And there's a lot of instances where I look back and almost wish she had just said, no, you can't do that, and kept me from making those mistakes. I'm not one of those people that typically regrets things I've done, because I'm one of those people that look at every decision I've ever made has led me to where I am at this point in my life. And I'm pretty happy with where I am at this point in life. Like, people will be like, oh man, if only I had had a chance to be with X, Y, and Z person. Well, yeah, but if I was with that woman, then I wouldn't be with my wife now. I wouldn't have my children now. So, and since I came to faith in Christ through my children, that's how God roped me in. Yeah, no, I'm happy here, because I have what is most important in Christ, and was second most important in a loving wife and amazing children. So there's nothing I could have by making another decision or regretting a decision I did make, because everything I could ever want, I already have. The Lord has already provided. We might not have wealth, but I have everything important. So I don't tend to regret my decisions, because they've all led me to this place of incredible abundance and provision, and to a saving knowledge in Christ, which outweighs anything else I could have ever had in life. So moving on to verse 6, though. If indeed she takes a husband while bound by her vows, or by a rash utterance from her lips by which she bound herself, and if her husband hears it, and makes no response to her on the day that he hears it, then her vows will stand, and her agreements by which she has bound herself shall stand. So, now she's married, she's now under the authority of her husband. If she makes a rash vow, or an utterance, and her husband makes no response, then she's bound. And it's funny, because women will also read things like this and say, how come you think women are so irrational? And have you seen how many fights women get their men put into because a woman can't control her mouth when she gets angry? And she lives under that belief that no one can hit a woman thing. Meanwhile, her husband or brother or boyfriend ends up having to be a punching bag for her. Yeah, women make a lot of rash utterances from their mouths. It's just a reality. Women are more emotional than men when it comes to these things. They make these statements, oftentimes that need to be apologized for or regretted. And this is a provision by the Lord, once again, to protect them from that. It's a privilege that they have, that a husband can protect them from a vow. Because like it says, by her vows or a rash utterance. If she makes a vow that's good for her, the husband's not gonna overrule her. That's what's always missed in these things. If the young woman under her father's house, or the married woman, makes a good vow, makes something that's a benefit to her, and a something that glorifies the Lord, they're not going to overrule her in any of that. It's only when she does something incorrectly. Meanwhile, the husband does not get the same protection. The husband needs to live with whatever dumb thing came out of his mouth. Because if you ever met a man, you've met a man who said some dumb stuff and ran his mouth when he really should not have. But he doesn't have the privilege in this Israelite society of having someone overrule him and be like, yeah, no, you can't do that. In our society nowadays, we actually kind of have that privilege a little bit, where since we've equalized these things a little bit, not necessarily for the good, but husbands sometimes are protected by their wives when the husband says, hey, you know what, I'm thinking of, and the wife goes, no, you won't, because that's stupid. Good. But legally, under the law of God at this time, the husband could not be overruled by the wife. But if her husband overrules her on the day that he hears it, he shall make void her vow, which she took and what she uttered with her lips, by which she bound herself, and the Lord will release her. So everyone is responsible for the vow they make. It will be accounted to them. In the case of women, they shall be able to get out of it if their husband overrules them, because they made a dumb vow. They made something that was not good, that would end up being to their detriment. A great privilege that men typically don't have. Also, any vow of a widower or a divorced woman by which she has bound herself shall stand against her. So, if a widow or a divorced woman binds herself to something, she's just like a man at this point. It's going to stand against her because she does not have that protection any longer of someone to overrule her. If she vowed in her husband's house or bound herself by an agreement with an oath, and her husband heard it, and made no response to her and did not overrule her, then all her vows shall stand, and every agreement by which she bound herself shall stand. So, if at the time before her husband died or before she was divorced, heard these vows and didn't overrule her, then she's bound by those vows. But if her husband truly made them void on the day he heard them, then whatever proceeded from her lips concerning her vows or concerning from the agreement binding her, it shall not stand. Her husband has made them void, and the Lord will release her. So, if before he died or during their marriage, she made vows, he voided them, then she's not held to them. Because while she was under his protection, he overruled her in these things. Every vow and every binding oath to afflict her soul, her husband may confirm it, or her husband may make it void. Now, if her husband makes no response whatever to her from day to day, then he confirms all her vows, or all the agreements that bind her. He confirms them because he has made no response to her on the day that he heard them. But if he does make them void after he heard them, then he shall bear her guilt. So you have, as the husband, as the husband in this point, he had to void them when he heard about them. He might not hear about a vow for a couple of days, but as soon as he hears it, he needs to void it. If he waits to void it because he wants to procrastinate or wants to think about it and take time, then they are now in effect, and he also will bear her guilt. Because now he's trying to void them after the fact, and that's not the way it works. These are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses between a man and his wife, and between a father and his daughter in her youth and in her father's house. So this is daughters, wives, women being given an extra level of protection from falling into sin and being held account for rash oaths and things and words that would bind them in these oaths and these promises that they should not have done. Once again, it's not a negative. It's actually a great positive for women, because it is a way in which during ancient times when women were treated terribly, that these are ways that the Lord took to protect the women of his people. so that they would not be taken advantage of, so that that way they wouldn't fall into a sin that they could have been protected from. They wouldn't be taken advantage of. They wouldn't be mistreated because the men were able to protect them, oftentimes from themselves in a way, and from people trying to prey upon them. So moving on to chapter 31. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people. So here we take going into Moses' last stand, so to speak. This is one of the last things that the Lord wants him to do. Of course, Moses will not be. We have a whole nother book to go through before that happens. But here we have the Lord telling Moses, take vengeance on the Midianites. These Midianites who brought you into sinfulness, who brought these women of Moab into your presence to get the congregation to fall into sin, to get this plague, who brought you and pulled you away from me after I refused to curse you, you are now going to go take vengeance on these Midianites. You now need to lead the armies in to take vengeance on these people because of what they have done. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, Arm some of yourselves for war, and let them go against the Midianites to take vengeance for the Lord in Midian. 1,000 from each tribe of all the tribes of Israel you shall send to the war. So 12,000. So there were recruited from the divisions of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Then Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 from each tribe. He sent them to the war with Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest, with the holy articles and the signal trumpets in his hand. And they warred against the Midianites, just as the Lord commanded Moses, and they killed all the males. They killed the kings of Midian with the rest of those who were killed, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. Balaam, the son of Beor, they also killed with the sword. Now, if you remember, Balaam, during one of his attempted cursings, ended up being a blessing, and he said how he wished to die and live as the righteous children of Israel would. But here we see, for his wickedness, for him turning the children of Israel away from God and pulling them into sin, tempting them into sin, we see Balaam himself being slaughtered by the sword. Wickedness will be punished. Sometimes it's not punished here on earth. Sometimes they need to wait. We need to be patient because vengeance will be the Lord's in the life to come. But in this case, these kings of Midian who wanted to curse the children of Israel because they were so fearful of them coming to attack them, brought war upon themselves in their wickedness and brought about their own destruction, including Balaam, who was warned in the very beginning, do not go with the princes of Balak. Do not go with these people. Stay where you are. I will not curse the children of Israel. Do not go with them. But Balaam wanted to keep going back. You sure you don't want me to go, Lord? So the Lord said, you know what? You want to go be in sin? Fine. Go be in sin. But the consequences and the wages of that sin will be upon you. And the wages of that sin were a death violently at the end of a blade. You foment violence, you die by violence. To live by the sword is to die by the sword. He could have easily stayed behind and lived. He chose to go, rebel, disobey the original command of the Lord, and ended up slaughtered because of it. The kings of Midian wanted to live in sin, wanted to rebel against the Lord. Balaam wanted to join them, and he did, in their death. He wanted their riches, but instead he got slaughtered in the same way they did. He shared their fate instead of their riches. And the children of Israel took the women of Midian captive with their little ones, and took as spoil all their cattle, all their flocks, and all their goods. They also burned with fire all the cities where they dwelt, and all their forts, and they took all the spoil and all the booty of man and beast. Now people will look at this, and I have seen the craziest things. Like, this is God. God promotes sexual slavery because the children of Israel took the women of Midian captive. I've heard unbelievers say this is where God condones rape. Where does that say that? Anywhere. The fact is, these people were taken captive. And people will look at slavery not just, and that's why I said you can't really, before I said that you can't really try to turn a blind eye to the fact that the Bible speaks about slavery. Now, oftentimes people will point out rightly that a lot of the slavery that the Bible is speaking about is actual bond servitude, not chattel slavery as we saw in the mid-thousands, as we saw for centuries and still see to this day. I mean, African slavery is still a very real thing. Same with Islamic slavery. That it was never abolished. Christians were the ones that abolished it among their own people, but the rest of them have not. But there was actual slavery of captives. They were taken slaves as property. But even that was a blessing in disguise because it gave them a chance, one, to live. Because the other option is to slaughter these women and their children, to slaughter every one of them, because that's what you do in war. You slaughter them all, or you leave them behind with no men to be slaughtered by someone else, to be taken as slaves by someone else, or to starve and die of pestilence. Or the third option is to take them into slavery, to have them in a home that cares for them and is commanded to treat them properly, and give them the opportunity to come to know the one true and living God and become Israelites themselves. The world is a fallen, sinful, depraved, wicked place. There's no denying that. The Lord didn't create it that way. We fell. We brought this upon ourselves. When Adam sinned, part of the sin of Adam was for but a moment. He chose Satan over the Lord. He chose to follow the enemy, giving the enemy the ability to rule over this world. As Christ would call him, the king of this present age. That's why Revelation sees the Lamb taking the scroll and breaking the seals to redeem the land back from the enemy. Because Adam had given him the land through his allegiance, if only but a moment. Because sometimes a moment is all it takes to make a mistake that lasts forever, lasts for a lifetime. Sometimes all it takes is a moment to change the world of everyone around you. but a moment to do something that cannot be undone. But Christ, on the other hand, but God, set forth a plan to undo. And that's what we're in the midst of now. So although these women and children were going into slavery, they were going into a better kind of slavery, a slavery that would give them a chance to experience the true one and living God, which is a blessing coming out of the wickedness of the reality of the world we live in, which is abundant wickedness. Almost as if we are steeped in a miasma of sin and wickedness. Then they brought the captives, the booty, and the spoil to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the congregation of the children of Israel, to the camp in the plains of Moab by the Jordan, across from Jericho. And Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was angry with the officers of the army, with the captains over the thousands, and captains over the hundreds who had come from the battle. So they're coming. And now they're angry. Now you get to why, though. And Moses said to them, "Have you kept all the women alive? Look, these women caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man intimately." So he's saying, look, you kept these men and women, these children, these women. And now he's going to tell them to do something that is awful by our own consciousness. But there is reason for it. A reason he's already explained. Kill the males of every one of the little ones, so that way they do not grow up to be an enemy force inside of your congregation. So that way they don't grow up hating you with strife in their hearts against you. And kill every woman who has known a man intimately. Every sexually active woman. Kill them, because it was these very women who were brought in by Balaam to cause the Israelites to trespass against the Lord and cause this plague to spread throughout the congregation. These women came among you. So kill these people, lest you fall back into the idolatry, is the point. Unless you fall back into what you had fallen into before. That is the underlying point. You fell into sin. You should have eradicated them. You didn't. But now you got to get rid of these women. And as for you, remain outside the camp 7 days. Whoever has killed any person, and whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves and your captives. On the 3rd day and on the 7th day, purify every garment, everything made of leather, everything woven of goat's hair, and everything made of wood. So, once again, the unbeliever will say, well, this is God talking about sexual slavery and raping the captives. And no, Moses was saying, kill them so you do not do these things, because you have fallen into sin this way once before by these women coming and seducing you. You are not to be seduced by these women again and follow them into the sexual sin and idolatry that you followed them in before. So now you're only really leaving the young girls behind. You're leaving the young girls behind, and that's it. Good things, bad things. It is just, this is the way it's going to be. Leaving the women and girls behind. That will not lead you back into sin. Then Eleazar the priest said to the men of war who had gone to battle, This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord commanded Moses. Only the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that can endure fire, you shall put through the fire, and it shall be clean, and it shall be purified with the water of purification. But all that cannot endure fire, you shall put through water, and you shall wash your clothes on the 7th day and be clean, and afterward you shall come into the camp. So, everything that's unclean, you need to cleanse. Cleanse it through fire if it can survive fire. If not, wash it with the water of purification. But everything must be clean because it came from an unclean place. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Count up the plunder that was taken, of man and beast, you and Eleazar the priest and the chief fathers of the congregation, and divide the plunder into 2 parts, between those who took part in war, who went out to battle, and all the congregation. And levy a tribute for the Lord on the men of war who went out to battle, 1 of every 500 of the persons, the cattle, donkeys, and the sheep. Take it from their half and give it to Eleazar the priest as a heave offering to the Lord. And from the children of Israel's half you shall take 1 of every 50, drawn from the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, and the sheep, and all the livestock, and give it to them, to the Levites, who keep charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. So basically, the people who went out to war are going to have the greater share of what was brought back because they were the ones risking their lives. But even in that case, both the people who went out to fight and the people who are now sharing in it, who just are of the congregation, are going to have to give a tithe in a way to the Levites and the priests, because they need to be provided for, and they are not the fighting men. So it needs to be offered up to the Lord in the care of the Levites and the priests. The booty remaining from the plunder which the men of war had taken was 667,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 persons in all, of women who had not known a man intimately. And the portions of those who had gone out to war were in number 337,500 sheep. And the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 675. The cattle were 36,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 72. The donkeys were 30,500, of which the Lord's tribute was 61. The persons were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 persons. So Moses gave the tribute which was the Lord's heave offering to Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. And from the children of Israel's half, which Moses separated from the men who fought, now the half belonging to the congregation was 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 persons. And from the children of Israel's half, Moses took 1 of every 5th, drawn from man and beast, and gave them to the Levites, who kept charge of the tabernacle of the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. So you're looking at all the distribution, how much they had, how much was to be given up, and it was a lot. As it said, they burnt down cities and forts. There was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of area covered, there was a lot of victory had, and this is what they brought back from it. Then the officers who were over thousands of the army, and captains over thousands, and captains over hundreds, came near to Moses, and they said to Moses, Your servants have taken account of the men of war, who were under our command. Not a man of us is missing. Therefore we have brought an offering for the Lord, what every man found of ornaments of gold, armlets, and bracelets, and signet rings, and earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord. So Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from them, all the fashioned ornaments, and all the gold of the offerings that they offered to the Lord from the captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, was 16,750 shekels. The men of war had taken spoil, every man for himself. And Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from the captains of thousands and of hundreds, and brought it into the tabernacle of meeting as a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord. They set out with 12,000 people. They sacked city after city, fort after fort, enough to take all of these riches, all of these livestock, all of these people captive of the non-fighting men. And still, not a single Israelite fell, because they walked with the Lord going before them. The Lord ordained the footsteps of the righteous in this fight. He kept not a single one of them from falling. That wouldn't always be the case. But it was important here, especially because as this fledgling nation was taking its first steps out into warring with the people of the promised land, they had to be assured of God's greatness and victory. They will suffer losses to come. But he did not want them disheartened in this beginning. And because of that, you see them laying out offerings in tribute to the Lord. Lord, you've seen us through in amazing ways. We want to give back to you even more than what you commanded us to, because of your blessings, because of your graciousness, because of your greatness. We want to give more to you, because we can see the abundant blessings you've poured out upon us. We see them, we respect them, we love them. Here, Lord, here, take from us as we willingly give it to you. We have seen blessings. Are we as willing to give of ourselves what the Lord has blessed us with? In his provision, in his abundance, are we willing to also then give up to the Lord and say, Lord, you have blessed us in so abundance. We wish to give this to you. We wish to give to you because we acknowledge how you have seen us come through these battles. And some of us have been through battles in our lives, have been brought through the thick of tragedy and strife and hardship. Some of us have been pulled through in amazing ways. And are we willing to sit back and say, Lord, this is for you. This is what I wish to give to you, to use in the growing of your kingdom. Because we all have something to give, whether it be riches, time, service. We have something to give. And are we giving it? Or are we trying to hold it back? Because if we are blessed in abundance, we should give in abundance. Because it all belongs to him anyway. Every dollar we earn is a provision from him. Every breath we take is a gift from him. So we should pay it back in service of his kingdom and for his glory. But that is where we shall end it for this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.